We said that August was only the start of a tide of game releases, and we weren't kidding because my team had to half the number of releases this month, down to the 25 that you should be watching. We've got big AAAs, tiny solo dev entries, and some real promising looking games from big franchises, along with things you won't expect. As an example, did you know that there's a Max Payne spiritual successor landing this month? Yeah, I didn't either. Obviously then first, this month started with Starfield launching in early access September 1st, with 5 days later in September 6th coming out for the rest of us. See that moon? You can go there, but with a few loading screens. Multiple factions, endless amounts of dialogue, ship building, dog fighting, jetpacks, and many skill checks all tied up in a no aliens showed early 2000s NASA punk art style aesthetic, which, to be honest, I know I love from playing it. It's their first new IP in more than 20 years, there's a lot riding on it. They, of course, can't rely on the recognition of Elder Scrolls or Fallout to bring audiences in for the game, but I think they know that it being a Bethesda Game Studios game means something in itself. Of course, with that, you already know what to expect. We've got that type of conversation animation, which I can confirm is often hilarious, some janky but actually oddly satisfying gunplay, and many quests to do. It has its flaws. So far, I'll say I'm enjoying it. On to the fifth end, we've got an impressionistic indie in Chants of Sennaar. The developer Runedisk are asking players to bring communities back together post-Tower of Babel by solving puzzles in a visually impressive world. It's a big step up from the studio after their trick-shot-based multiplayer shooter Varion, so we'll see if switching over to single-player and very different sort of game pays off. Over in the sixth then, Baldur's Gate 3 dropped on the PS5. Early reports so far are that the port is broadly on par with the PC release, which basically means many more people will enjoy one of the best games of this year, maybe even the last 5 or 10. Then Square Enix brings us Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis on the 7th. This is technically another step in the Final Fantasy VII remake verse, right? It's a remake of all aspects of the original game in that classic chibi format they've started to do. There are a few additions. It actually includes all the prequels and spin-offs, right? Things like Advent Children or Dirge of Cerberus, alongside some new narrative elements around the origin of Soldier and Sephiroth. Now that might be exciting to you, but unfortunately, it's a single-player, mobile-exclusive, free-to-play episodic game with loot box monetization. Wow. Now, while you're probably not going to be playing that, of course, maybe it's worth keeping an eye out on some narrative things that could be reworked into Final Fantasy VII Rebirth in early 2024. Now, cozy farming sims are a dime a dozen, but this time Fae Farm is actually standing out a little bit in the field with its release on the 8th. It's got some genre-defying features that kind of separate the narrative from a time frame. It's quite interesting. The developer Phoenix Labs is basically offering a more relaxed approach to farming, and it's even experimenting with magic, monsters, and more things for you to dig into. It's, of course, got the now genre standard co-op for up to 4 people to complete that package. Then a very different title on the 11th, Hauma, a detective noir story, is a comic-style detective adventure set in Munich, fully voiced, promising detailed player-driven investigation mechanics where you're using a dedicated, Charlie Day style pegboard to track all your clues, you're gathering through your puzzles, your riddles, and all of that. So if you like adventure games, you like doing criminal stuff, well, I think you'll really like that. Now, that's not your speed. Also on the same day, we've got the Crew Motorfest, and statistically, some of you play that because the ongoing player numbers for the Crew games are kind of astonishing. It is more open-world driving, this time navigating the Hawaiian islands in up to 600 different cars. There's premium access on the 11th with a full release on the 14th. Yep, some people really do want this, and Ubisoft know that if they give a bit of an early access for some more money, that they can indeed make plenty more money from those dedicated fans. Now, equally speed-focused, but very different, we've got Eternights that comes out on the 12th. This, I'm actually really interested in. It's from Studio Psy, and it's unashamedly Persona-inspired, right? Essentially, the apocalypse came, something turned humanity into monsters, and only your protagonist and a cast of love interests can stop them in the final weeks of Earth. It's got everything you would want with the visual novel-style conversations, relationship management, and dungeon crawling, but this dungeon crawling is action combat. Personally, that's big for me. I vastly prefer action combat, so actually, to me, yeah, this is a really enticing game. Now, a different type of RPG that's also coming out on the 12th is MythForce, deliberately playing with the tropes of Saturday morning cartoons like He-Man and She-Ra. This is a game coming from Beamdog, who are the people who made the very popular Baldur's Gate CRPG remakes. Yeah, kind of wild. This time, though, it's a very different proposition for a role-playing game. It's a roguelike, seeing players delve into an evil castle for treasure, and right in line with that, it's got this rotoscoped graphical style that's just jumped straight out of a CRT monitor from back in the day. You can, though, slow all the way down on the 13th with Land Above, Sea Below, coming out from Glass Cannon Studios. It's a hex-based landscape builder in the style of the award-winning Dorfromantik, which you should check out, by the way. But the wrinkle here is that you'll be trying to build out and upwards as you deal with an eternal rainy season that is swallowing tiles at lower altitude. The 14th, then, is our first real big crunch day with September, right? Craziness going on, indies, remasters, and AAA blockbusters all competing for your time. First, and with a name that is very much codifying the X-Survivors genre, we've got Gallowspire Survivors from BKOM Studios. It's a licensed spin on the roguelite bullet hell gameplay style that, well, has just got many entries every month, and most of them are pretty great in some way. It's based on the Pathfinder tabletop role-playing game. It launches in early access, and I suppose they're hoping that familiarity with the brand will help people go in there with a very approachable style of gameplay. Now, the twist here is a system where players can bring along one of their other characters through their run. Of course, will this be enough to stand out against all the other Survivors games that are coming out all the time? We'll only have to wait and see if it survives. Now, its first competitor is two games in one, actually. Remakes of the 2000s GameCube games, Baten, Kaitos 1 and 2 HD Remaster. These are classic Monolith Soft games that never really got their, I think, full praise and due. So now they're releasing on modern Nintendo consoles with a suite of modern updates that will allow players to automatically skip combat, ignore combat, and the turn-based card battler, I suppose, spin on it might actually be a lot easier for modern audiences to just get stuck into. Next, then, we've got the obviously massive Mortal Kombat 1. It is the reboot of the famous franchise that's hitting in this crazy year of fighting games. It's following, of course, in the heels of Street Fighter 6. Yeah, pretty crazy. It resets back things in terms of the story for a second time, actually. And it's also getting the assist of some cameos to switch up that gameplay, as well as a host of guest fighters like, let's see, Homelander and Omni-Man being in the Season Pass. In terms of how you'll be playing, it's the standard suite of multiplayer options, paired with a fully fledged narrative story, but this edition's wrinkle is an invasion mode. It's referencing some classic gameplay from earlier editions like Conquest. This is a single-player board game mode where you're just clearing the map of fights and gathering cosmetic rewards. And of course, Street Fighter 6 has really shown us just how many people can enjoy fighting games if you give them something beyond just the straight matches to play, right? Like Street Fighter 6's narrative side was absolutely mental, right? I'm not usually into fighting games. That's totally something I'd check out. Overall, you know the deal, though, in terms of dialogue, sort of stilted animation, and of course, very, very gratuitous ultra-violence. It absolutely does look to be Mortal Kombat. Okay, a breather then. On the 15th, we've got Boti Byteland Overclocked from Purple Ray Studios. It's a classically inspired 3D mascot platformer in a style that we're actually seeing from more indie teams nowadays because, of course, AAA is really failing to deliver that past the odds like Ratchet & Clank or maybe Spyro Remake. It's set in a world of computers and technology which will see players platforming and exploring to solve puzzles, battle bosses, and complete levels using magnet-based powers, all with drop-in, drop-out co-op gameplay. Okay, no sun to worship. Oh man, this tickles me. It is a love letter from a solo indie developer toward an era of classic games that we just don't see anymore. It's coming out on the 15th. Very much a Splinter Cell environment management in a horrifying sci-fi setting. I think it's an absolutely fantastic draw. Solo dev may have a few things that are a bit rough around the edges, but I think a really special effort, and I love to see it. And then a very long time coming from the point of view of both Starbreeze's balance sheet and also players, we've got Payday 3 coming out on the 16th. I'm actually really excited for this. This time the action is moving to New York and New Jersey. We'll be scouting out targets, planning heists, executing them all in those fun, colorful masks. Sometimes it'll go great, sometimes you'll get out in no time and there'll be chaos. Maybe you'll have hostages, maybe you'll be shooting your way out with up to 3 friends. I really had fun with Payday 2, so I'm really excited. There are some added wrinkles this time though. Characters can now take on some role-playing game style skills which direct the flow of the heist, like being better at shooting, better at stealth, or any of those other heist activities. So very much the natural evolution of the core formula in this series, designed to adapt to how players actually will be playing. Now, it's not without some costs. Some fans are slightly concerned by the addition of a, always online requirement for one, which to me is quite sad, even just doing this. And I mean, for me, the ideal thing here is like split screen co-op, right, with the other half. Like, that'd be fun, but anyway. Broadly, the core of the game will be staying the same. It's very much the classic Payday formula, polished up to, well, meet 2023, and very importantly, it's on Game Pass. So, odds are a lot of us will have some conspirators to go and heist with. The 19th then brings us to a highly anticipated game, and that is Lies of P. Bloodborne, but Pinocchio is the common meme for this game, where you play a Geppetto-made puppet in a dark fantasy world that strongly evokes some of that Soulsborne gameplay. The impressions are strongly recommending this game based on its combat and its world design alone. That's coming from a very, very solid Steam Next Fest demo that people actually played, and was rated as actually the second most played thing in the Next Fest. In particular, the world design has really just leaned into the grotesque possibility of the puppets, right, allowing for some really creepy bosses and enemies, alongside a recognition that your character is an automaton, and you can do some really silly and wacky, fun things with weaponry, right? So the whole swath of interesting options for replacing your arms with cannons and stuff. Seems awesome. Getting hands-on has also, I think, allowed the developer to react to feedback given, and with that original version of Next Fest being so enjoyed, I mean, a lot of us are convinced that this is really going to be a fairly major title. Okay, much more cutesy, but probably the same potential for dark comedy. We've got Party Animals coming out on the 20th. It was first teased in 2019, a physics-based party combat game whose beta and tests actually garnered massive audiences from streamers who just really enjoyed it. It looks really fun and wacky, right? To put it bluntly, gang beasts, but with more cuddly characters and greater environmental depth for a more, I say, approachable package, and with way more maps and characters on launch. So it is another multiplayer title now coming to Game Pass on day one after multiple delays, where chaos will reign supreme. An entirely different option then for your simulated combat coming in the 20th is Men of War 2. It's a bit different to Party Animals. Absurdly high-detailed World War II strategy game. It's the latest in that franchise, of course, and this is micromanaging down to the level of controlling what bullets and gear are held by your individual troops. It's an amazing franchise of games. There are 2 single-player campaigns, multiplayer co-op challenge modes, and just an incredible level of graphical and sound design. So if this is up your alley, then boy howdy, they're going full bore on what Men of War is. Okay, next, an interesting thing, maybe it won't hit the audience of this channel, but there is EA FC 24, releasing on the 22nd. That basically is FIFA 24, but obviously they're not doing the FIFA thing anymore. EA are just going off on their own. Will probably save them a lot in licensing fees, but will the loss of that FIFA name hurt them? That's the big question. Meanwhile, though, we've got Avatar: The Last Airbender Quest for Balance. So many of us love Avatar. This is basically coming at the same time that Nickelodeon are kind of reviving that IP. In this case, it's a comic retelling of the series as a puzzle platformer. Maybe it'll be better received than Platinum's Korra game, but we'll see. Now, the 26th is another utter bloodbath because it starts with Phantom Liberty, the big DLC for Cyberpunk 2077 that also comes along with a free update that polishes up a lot of issues. This is big for the CDPR fans who are just desperate to not get burned by another launch and maybe want to get the full value out of their Cyberpunk purchase. We've got a new area on the map, new spy-themed quest lines, and supposedly a new ending for the original game. It's a DLC that I think will get a lot of people back into Night City. We've got new story, we've got new gameplay options. Really, it is honestly pretty humongous. Especially, it's being fronted by Idris Elba in a leading role, alongside even more Johnny Silverhand, which I think will be pretty damn neat. Yeah, should be meaty, should be fun, but of course, the DLC starring Idris is only half of what people are excited for, because initial reports suggest that 2077 is going to benefit greatly from 3 years of post-launch support and just player feedback. They've overhauled almost every system into the game. They've added very anticipated features like the opportunity for like proper car chases. They've actually rebuilt a lot from scratch. Effectively, they've changed so much from the original game that in some ways it'll be a bit unrecognizable. They've overwrote what was there with something newer and shinier, and I'm totally there for that. And I suppose in a way it's the most cyberpunk way that this whole story could have gone. Okay, matching CDPR for the punk tone, but on a different budget, we've got El Paso Elsewhere. This is an indie Max Payne-like game, right? So take, indie Max Payne, make it hyper-stylized and about murdering vampires in an eldritch hotel in New Mexico that has somehow gained 46 stories underground. That's cool. It's made by people who adore those classic third-person shooters like Max Payne or Stranglehold. It's a stylish shooter filled with destructible physics objects, horrifying enemies, and a plot where you're trying to save victims of Dracula, who also happens to be your ex. I'm down for that. The 26th also brings us a game that probably won't compete for the same audience. It's long been a resident on Nintendo's Directs. People have been very excited for a cozy puzzle adventure game in the form of Mineko's Night Market. They've been excited for years, actually. It's an adventure that sees you navigating your home of an island that is deeply steeped in Japanese mythology. It's not a farming sim, but it is using a lot of those same aesthetics and mechanics around puzzles and crafting. And if it's as cute as the audience wants, then I think it'll be a pretty damn good time. And it'll also pair nicely with Harvest Moon, a wind, and it'll probably pair quite nicely with Harvest Moon, The Winds of Anthos from Natsume. Man, I have not played one of these games since Friends of Mineral Town back in the Game Boy. But yes, of course, since the whole Story of Seasons split happened where, they kind of kept the gameplay, but Natsume kept the name. It's been a bit weird, but this year's, entry into the franchise seemingly is a bit more ambitious. It's got an open world setting where you'll be exploring to gather crops and animals, plus all of the traditional Harvest Moon aspects of wooing partners, building your farm, and avoiding disaster. And I suppose it would be nice if we could have the game that actually codified farming sims in the West back. So, maybe it'll actually, be in line with the legacy that that name would suggest. Finally then, the 29th is bringing us Cocoon. This one is a mind-bender brought to you by, actually, the lead gameplay designer of Inside and Limbo. It's an indie puzzle platformer where you need to use the orbs in each level to solve puzzles. But this isn't your classic, place object in location to solve puzzle game. No, you solve puzzles by going inside the orbs into an entirely different level, and they have got puzzles inside them. And maybe even also have more orbs with puzzles. Yeah, big old mindbender. It'll be pretty incredible to see in motion, I think. Definitely feels like the sort of game, though, that you actually need to just get your hands on and play to understand properly. And there you have it. That's us to the end of the month. The 25 games of September that you should be keeping an eye out on. Man, what a list. The guys put so much work into researching this one. There's a lot of games to be excited about there. Certainly more than I know I'm going to have time to play, which ultimately is the problem of gaming right now. So we do these videos every month. Be on the lookout for them, as well as essentially daily updates on the gaming news and all the things that are going on. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what games have piqued your interest, and I'll see you next time.